jump in here. So to identify the opportunity, this is the part that you start with in terms of looking at an assessment or doing your assessment for a proposal. So when you see a link or you see a proposal out there, a solicitation, the first thing that you want to do, you want to assess that. Like as an example, whether you go on FBO.gov or whether you go to DeKalb County or whatever your source, when you see a solicitation, first thing that you want to do, you want to identify the opportunity, because here again, it could be a set aside. Okay, even though it may look really good, but then if you're not an 8A, if you're not a woman-owned business, that may be something that you need to take in consideration if you're going to respond to that opportunity. Then the next thing you want to do, you want to qualify the opportunity. I go through a process of where I do a crosswalk. It's a matrix. I do a crosswalk to understand, what are the resources that I have here? What are the gaps? And then by doing so, it'll help you to identify, okay, these are all of the capabilities we have, including the infrastructure, including the capability, but also the capacity. But it may mean that you might need to team up with someone else, or it may mean that you might not have part of the infrastructure you need. As an example, if you look at a solicitation and they say that they want to provide IT courses online, well, do you offer IT courses online? Okay, but if you don't, is there a way for you to fulfill that need? You might want to look at a third party that you can do a contract with to be able to offer those things online. So it's not always not doing it to say that you can't do it, but it's looking at how do you fulfill that need. The next thing is you want to start a capture plan. And Danielle, you may be able to relate to this. A lot of times when people engage technical writers, one of the things that the technical writer is responsible for is the content, okay? But just because you're responsible for the content doesn't mean that you know everything, okay? So when we say start a capture plan, it's basically what you're doing. You're laying out, okay, who are your subject matter experts, okay? If there's market research that you need to do, go ahead and start your resource, your market research. Are there particular agencies that you need to go ahead and target, okay, for your research? This probably is not something you have to be concerned about, but sometimes when you respond to an RFP like to a CDC, it's more scientific, okay? So if it's a scientific, or even in a situation where I think with not Danielle, but with, what's her name? Gloria. Gloria did some research also. She submitted a proposal, but one of the things that she did in terms of looking at costs, she did product research to find out what are some of the other products out here. If you're in construction, research also include looking at the materials. Do the materials meet the requirements? So all of those things you want to go ahead and start when you talk about your capture plan, because the capture plan will also tell you where your gaps are. It'll also tell you who do you need to help you in writing that proposal, okay? And if I'm talking too fast, just slow me down, because this is your session. Okay, and then prepare the opportunity assessment package. A lot of times what I do when I'm going through a proposal, if I'm writing a proposal, whether I'm doing it for myself or I'm doing it for the team, I will go in and I will do a synopsis. A synopsis is that you're taking the time to go through and you're reading that proposal to find out exactly what it's asking for. Because even though I know that the people that I'm writing it for, the client that I'm writing it for, they should be familiar with that product, but most often they're looking to you to guide them and tell them exactly what do we need to do. Because then they wouldn't be engaging you as a technical writer, or your team is relying on you because, to say that they've got to read a 144-page document, that's your role to do that. If you're taking on the role to be the technical writer, what you're going to do is that you're going to give your team a synopsis of that, because here again, that becomes part of your go, no-go. You're also going to identify where do you see the problems or the risks, okay? Because take for instance, if you say, this is a nationwide RFP, even though you're very, very interested in it, but the risk here is to say, do you have the overhead? Can you carry the overhead? Okay? That's a risk. Okay, so those are some of the things you take in consideration when you're setting up a proposal and deciding whether it's a go or no go. So at this point, let me go ahead and pass some information out to you so you'll see what I'm talking about. If a client comes to me and say, Renzi, I think we want to go after this proposal. So the first stage that I'm going to do is I'm going to have a conference call and I'm going to walk through this form with them. Because writing a proposal is an investment of resources, but it's also an investment of time. Okay? So the first thing that I want to do is that I'm going to complete this form. And actually, mine is part of my whole work plan. I just build it into my work plan. And it's one of the first point of contacts that I have with that client. If the client comes to me and they tell me that they want to do the proposal, so I'm going to go online. I'm going to research the company. I want to see, what the capabilities and their capacity is. I want to research their website. I also want to see what their winning strategy is. So there are several resources out there that you can go to see if they have a history of winning contracts, okay? That's the other thing that I want to do. And so I'm taking them through this process here, and we're scoring this to find out if it's a go or it's a no-go. Sometimes when I take my clients through this, they still score marginally. But there are several different strategies behind why someone want to go ahead and complete the proposal, because sometimes it gives you feedback about what you're doing, what you have in place, and things that you don't have in place. As an example, I had a client who decided that they wanted to go ahead and go and pursue the proposal. Technically, the proposal was sound, but what she found out going through that process is that she needed to have a standard of operating procedures in place, or SOPs. She also realized that she needed to expand her processes and her procedures in terms of reporting accidents and stuff, because when you're transporting, if you're working with Medicaid, Medicare, those kind of agencies, they're very, very stringent. They're very, very stringent in terms of how you report, how you make sure that you record the incident, that report, like it's an escalating chain that you use to report these accidents, or events, and and it has to be well documented. It has to be well documented as such to say that they should be able to read your process to follow exactly what they can expect to happen. So here again, these are some of the things that we found out. The other thing you want to make sure of is that you can write a very sound technical proposal. It can be very sound, but sometimes the details I guess you say it's in the numbers. Understanding your cost, okay? Sometimes when I have new clients starting out, when it comes to their cost, you have to understand, of course, you don't want to exceed the budget, but that's where you go in and do your research. As an example, if you know that this contract came up last year and it was $188,000, that is a benchmark in terms of you putting your cost proposal together. So doing your research is very important to make sure that your cost is on, I'm sorry, I didn't start this, to make sure that you're taking in consideration all of the things that you need to. I've seen situations where the client forgot to put in any costs as far as labor costs. Now they get the materials, you get the materials and all of those things, but you forget to put in your labor costs. What are some of the other overhead? Are you paying insurance? Do you need to take in consideration supplies? Do you need to take it? What about office space? There are things that you need to take in consideration in terms of making sure that you capture all of those things in cost, because it's not just the bottom line, but a lot of times those contracting officers, when they go through and they see your line items, they're looking at your line items to see whether you've taken all of those matters in consideration. But the other thing, when we talk about that the government is risk averse, they're saying, okay, looking at this budget here, do they have the cash flow to cover the cost, okay? And if you do, can you cover the cost over a period of time, okay? Because even though one of the things I like about the government is that they're really good about reimbursing small companies. We've had some clients, they get reimbursed in a matter of 14 days. But here again, looking at what your submission is so important. In If you don't know how to use like spreadsheets to forecast your costs or to create models to forecast your costs, you might want to with Richard and to see if that's something that he can help you with or show you how to do that. Because oftentimes when if you lose a bid, sometimes it gets down to the cost. Okay, so either you overbid or underbid. Either way, the government takes all of those things in consideration. Any questions? Okay, so if it's a goal, you're going to organize your capture team. Yes.
This is one thing that, if you don't mind me saying,
Sure.
and this is me
Yeah.
speaking from a financial perspective,
Yeah.
it is very important that every small business know what your dollar is. What is
Yes.
your dollar? That how much does it take for you to operate
Right.
your business outside of project?
Right.
Your secretaries, your office supplies,
Right.
the whole thing. You need to know that number, because that number is what you have to meet regardless.
Right.
Every month. And so you need to know how long you can float your business. And so if you don't know that number,
Right.
or you skew that number, you'll lose money,
Right.
or you'll over or underestimate the project, and then you'll end up spending money from this project to pay for that project.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you don't know your number.
Exactly. It's you should know your numbers. And even if you have to add on additional staff, whether it's subcontractors that you adding on, you have to know how that factors into your P&L. That's why I'm saying a spreadsheet is so important, so you can model this cost out so you can see that. But the next thing, if it's a goal, you want to make sure that you go ahead and organize your capture team. Organizing your capture team is using a work plan. A work plan is kind of like your Bible to tell everybody their roles, responsibilities, and when they're on point and what you need from them, okay? So that is so important for you to be able to do that. Understand the customer's requirements and objectives. Here again, if you're the technical writer, or even if you're the business owner and you going after this, you want to make sure that you understand what the objectives are. And even as you're going through that proposal and you see that, through the solicitation, and you see that there are gaps or you have questions, make sure you submit your questions to the contracting officer before the deadline. Make sure you do that, because sometimes they make mistakes too. Okay, sometimes they make mistakes. So you want to make sure that as you go through the solicitation that you're capturing what those questions are. And then you're going to assess the competition and to develop a winning strategy. As an example, now if your background is accounting, okay? And so if you see some company like Anderson, is it Anderson that's a large CPA company?
We'll go with the Centric.
Okay. So, yeah, a Price Waterhouse, okay? Because that's the one thing about being in the contracting space, is that sometimes you see that there's no set-asides. If there's no set-asides, what happened is the big dogs, the big six, can come in and they can play just as well as you. But you have to assess, okay, is this something that I want to go after? And if you do, one of your strategies could be, I might want to team up with someone else to say, I'm a woman-owned small business, and this is how I can help you with this solicitation in terms of you creating a winning strategy. So those are some of the things that you have to assess, even if you got all of the capability, okay? Or you go and you take a look at the incumbent, and you see that the incumbent has been on that freaking contract for 10 years. Do you really want to waste your time, okay? Or you might want to say, yes, I want to play, but this will give me an opportunity to ask for a debriefing so that contracting officer will know who I am. So there's a couple of different strategies in terms of why you choose to play. Any questions? Yeah, sure.
It's off,
Yeah.
but I just needed to be recapped
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Set asides. What exactly?
A set aside. Okay. A set aside is that with the government, okay, there are pockets of populations of people who fall into these different buckets, okay? Like me, I fall into woman-owned small business. If you live in a HUD zone, you fall into that bucket, okay? If you're a veteran or service disabled veteran, you fall into those buckets. So the contracting officer, what they do is that they decide if this contract is going to be an open, competitive contract, or if they're going to set aside that contract for for one of the groups that fall into these different buckets, okay?
Okay.
That's
Okay.
what that means, okay? So if you fall into one of those different buckets, what that does is that it narrows down the competition.
Okay.
Okay, because if it's all women-owned small business, now, I mean, if you have a partner, it's 49, 51%, and you own the 51%, yeah, your spouse or your partner can still play. But if you're the prime, well, that eliminates everybody that is not a woman-owned small business. Same way with vets. Okay, if you're not a service-disabled vet or a vet in general, then that eliminates all of the people who are not vets. Okay, so those are some of the things in terms of strategies that they come up with to decide if it's going to be a set aside.
Okay.
And sometimes the size of the contract will determine it also.
Okay.
Okay. Pre-proposal, you want to assign the proposal resources to develop what we call as a straw man. And it's like a draft, your first pass, second pass, and then final. Your final copy is the one that it goes to production, okay? Oftentimes now, because we use a lot of the solicitation or your response now can be submitted via email, okay? So because of that, some of the costs associated with doing copies or putting them on CDs and all of this other kind of stuff, some of the counties still find some of that at the county level or at the state level, but most often in the federal space, there's a depository or you can submit everything via email, which I love. Just create a PDF file and send. But if you do that, what I do is that I do a delivery receipt and I also do a request read receipt because that way I know that they received it, but it also will report an error if they didn't receive it, okay? And even I'll go so far as to tell the contracting officer, please, confirm receipt. They send you a little email say confirm, okay? Okay, and now once you get your first draft, you want to review your response against the requirements as far as what they're asking for in the proposal. Then at the final stage, you want to finalize the proposal development plan, and you're going to plan to make sure that everybody is doing their roles and responsibilities. You can't plan enough when it comes to doing proposals. Okay, finalize the proposal development plan, and then you're going to start your kickoff meeting. This is where you bring your whole team together because oftentimes, even if you have remote people, sometimes when you have remote people who are part of your team, and they could be located in DC or whatever, the goal is that if you're the writer, you want to make sure that you're bringing them together, that everybody know what their roles and responsibilities are. And I use an Excel spreadsheet where people can check in. They say, okay, I've got 40% done. These are the things that I've completed. I need to complete these tasks by this certain date. So it becomes a master document where we're tracking the development of that response, of the proposal. Okay? And then the next step is that after you do that, you want to make sure you do a final review of the proposal to make sure, you've got all of the pieces in place, that everybody responded. But sometimes even when you're doing a proposal, what happens is that you find out that there are gaps, okay? Or you find out that, a subject matter expert, they may be great at doing the job, but they're not so good at describing what they do or being able to put it on pencil to paper. So in cases like that, I've had to do interviews, or I just tell them to send me what you have. Just send me everything you have, and through reading and doing my research, I can pull out what I need. I can extract what I need, okay? And so the last part is that after you review your proposal and stuff like that, you want to do a final just before you submit your proposal, just to make sure that you check everything off. One client that I did a proposal for, everything was just in place. Everything was just fantastic. She said, Renzi, you got everything here. All I need to do, I've created my email. I put it in draft mode. And the only thing that I need to do is on the day of, I just need to hit submit. Well, Lord, I don't know what she did, but she left out the cost proposal. She left out the cost proposal. And then she says she got an email from the contracting officer to say that she was non-responsive. I said, what is that? She said, because I had everything there. And so contacted the contracting officer, She said, yeah, I can send you a copy of what she submitted. She had her certs and reps there. That's your FAR report. She had the technical part was there. But what she failed, what I don't know how she did this, but she failed to attach the cost proposal. And she said, I rendered this, she said, I thought I did because I even in my checklist in my response to the contracting officer, I said the following documents are attached. And she said, well, why didn't the contracting officer contacted me? I said, she's not obligated to contact you to tell you that you did. Yeah, I said, she's not obligated to tell you that. Yeah.
Some people could perceive that as favoritism.
Yeah.
Or a special
Mhm.
if,
Yeah.
if you did, whatever you sent is what you sent.
Right.
And after that, we're done.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, and I told her, she was beating herself up on. I said, you know what? This is a valuable lesson. I said, because going forward, I said, you will never, ever do this again.
Right.
You know, and I said, sometimes you can just do a check. It's just to have someone, have one of your employees to come over and say, please check this email against what I need to submit. You know, okay? Okay, so oftentimes what you will find is that in the cost proposal, in the solicitation, they will tell you what they're evaluating. So these are some of the areas here that they're evaluating. It's a good benchmark, a self-check to say, are you covering all of these areas here? Technically, are you technically sound in terms of doing the work? You know, do you have the management team and a strategy in place to complete the work? The past performance, make sure your past performance as much as you can, you want to line it up with the solicitation. Because if you're doing a past performance to say they're looking for construction and painting and stuff like that, and then you give them a past performance where you did office administration work, that just doesn't jive. And if you don't have the past performance, maybe if you're subbing with someone, you can also use their past performance as well, okay? So those are some of the strategies in terms of what you can do to make sure you meet that past performance. Cost, you want to make sure when you look at the cost, yes?
Well, I was going to ask about past performance, but I'll wait.
Okay, go.
Okay, well, I was just going to ask because if you just going back to what you were saying. So if I'm in finance and I wanted to kind of, evolve and branch out, I would have. That's where the teaming really comes.
Yeah, if you don't have.
I don't have IT.
Yeah, right.
Or
okay.
construction or something.
Right.
So then I would have to team with someone else and use.
Yeah, that's one way in terms of how you can meet that requirement, okay? The other thing, if you're just getting started, now this I'm not sure, but take for instance, you have a business and you've been working with Anderson for the last 15 years and you've been doing CPA work and this kind of stuff. Your commercial experience, you can say what it is what you do because you're just getting started, but as much as you can balance that to show that you have a history of past performance, that you can submit that because at some point you've got to figure out, okay, I got to get started some kind of way. So I've had I know at the state level they look favorable against your experience as far as the private sector is concerned. I think as far as the officer is concerned, the federal government, that's something, you can ask. That could be a question that you can ask during the Q&A. And I've seen where, like for coaching, you have people who do a lot of behavior coaching and that kind of stuff. You don't find a lot of that in the federal space, but that was one of the questions we asked during the Q&A to say, would you accept that? In this case, the contracting officer said yes. Did you have a question?
Oh, no.
Okay. And so during the actual submittal, you want to do your closure strategy. And here, what I'm doing is I have a checklist that I'm using with my capture team to make sure that I have everything that I need from them. Make sure, like with the forms and the documents and everything, make sure that you account for all of the amendments, okay? Oh my gosh, I won't tell you. Sometimes people you run the risk of a non-response, you being non-responsive because you didn't include all of the attachments, okay? Read those attached, make sure you have all of those amendments in place, and you use a checklist just to mark everything off. That's where your work plan comes in handy. So as you get these documents or as you get this information from your team, if they're helping you, you're checking things off. But even then, I still go back and I highlight. Because sometimes you just get in a mindset where you're just checking things off. You just do it behaviorally. You just going through your routine. But I'll go back and I'll highlight things to make sure. And if something is missing or I didn't check, I use another highlighter to say that's something that I need to go back and check. Okay. Clean, and like I said, if you've got things that you need to make sure that you finalize before you submit that proposal, do that. The last thing that I do is that I take all of my files and everything that I do and I create a master file, because you know how you do it. I use different files, and sometimes if you're not careful, you end up in the wrong file. Okay? So I create a master file, and even if I'm working with a team, I tell them all of your deposit all of your documents, the changes or whatever, you're going to deposit it into this master file. And I want to make sure anything else, I'm taking everything else away, because I don't want to make a mistake where they put it in the wrong file. After we do that, the last thing that we do is that we want to close out the file. We do a debriefing. If you're writing for several people and you're writing with a team, sometimes it's like herding cats, okay? Everybody is not doing what they need to do, and it has an impact. It has an impact on your team. So a lot of times with the writing team, I'll do a debriefing to make sure that as we go through this process, if I have to write with that team again, there's lessons learned, okay? As an example, we had another team that I wrote for. They was out in Texas, and this guy here, he's would put clauses in the response to the government to say, you forgot to include this. And he put brackets, italics, and you know, he put those things. And I said, well, I've never seen anything like this. He said, well, the way that the government has this set up, this is not our staffing model. I said, so you're telling the government how you're going to change what they're asking for so it'll fit your staffing model. And I said, you know, I said, I don't know, but I wasn't a prime. I wasn't a prime on this. So luckily, the VP of business development, who had a lot of experience writing proposals and this kind of stuff, they came in and they saw where he had written out all of these changes in italics and brackets and stuff like that. Now, mind you, this postponed us going through that response and making sure that everything was timely, because now we had to go back. We had to go back and reconcile all of these things that he was saying to the points in the solicitation and make sure that that language was right. So can you imagine having to write and go back and you auditing and you checking your own work to make sure that, and we didn't create a crosswalk to see what he did, because I never did. I never written anything with him before, but I would have liked to have not stayed up to 2 a.m. Yeah.
Trying to redo your word.
Yeah, because he's the lead. He's the lead. I'm following him. He's the lead on this. Okay? So do exactly what the government is asking for. Okay? Do exactly what they're asking for. You know, if your proposal is right and everything, there will come you can, and here again, that's what the Q&A is for. Okay? It's so important that if you want to participate, don't drag your feet in participating. Use the time, because I'm telling you, you need every minute of it. Okay? But always do exactly what they're asking for. I see mistakes where instead of saying human resources, they'll say humana. Yeah, but you overlook those things. Yeah, you overlook those things, but
especially if they don't pop up on spell check.
right, exactly.
I've been looking at it for
Right.
the last 4 days.
Right.
So it says
You
to
need
be
fresh
researched.
eyes on it.
Yeah.
That's what I, fresh eyes.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Sometimes when you're a technical writer, sometimes you own your work like an artist, okay? But you have to make sure that let somebody else review your work. Let somebody else do it, because I don't care how experienced you get. And like you said, if you're writing things, oh my God, I can tell you, I wrote into a proposal because I'm writing, and I said, dang, I need to make sure that I pick up these items here. So I wrote in there that I need to make a list for groceries. And I'm just typing and I'm just going because I'm thinking, because some things that you know about proposal writing, it just comes to you. It just comes to you. And so I'm thinking, I'm typing. Well, thank God, because I have a friend who goes behind me. Yeah. And she said, Renzi, she said, I'm reading. She said, I hate to call you again because she calls me every time she sees something that she doesn't understand. She said, I hate to call you again, but she said, where does grocery list fit in here? I said, what are you talking about? She said, you have written in here. She said, go to paragraph H. Then, she took me through. She said, you've got grocery list written in this. I said, oh my God. I said, Gwen, I'm so happy you caught that. Because I said, this has nothing to do with groceries at all. Not at all. But it's just, you just get into a flow. You just type and you're going through it. And my thought, I interjected my thought in what I was writing. So she caught that. So all of those things you have to take in consideration when you write. I love to write. And so if you don't like to write, it shows up. It shows up in because it's just as dry as dust, okay? Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Because working, the longer I work with numbers,
Yeah.
the more I move away from, writing.
Right.
And so I have to write out the bullet points.
Yeah.
And I usually tell my friends to fluff it up for me.
Yeah.
Because
Because in your world, it's very matter of fact. You can't go there and have all this ambiguity when you talk about numbers and stuff. It's just really matter of fact, okay? So, but if someone needs to do a narrative of your numbers, that's where someone like Danielle and someone who writes, they can take that. And even if you give her key things about, what you want said, she can take that and then she can put a narrative to it. Because here again, even with numbers, sometimes the government will ask, I see the numbers, but just because they're asking for it doesn't mean that they're a numbers person.